Guess who's back? Yes, indeed. We're here with Chaos today, the Warriors of Chaos, specifically in Total War Warhammer 2 multiplayer. Haven't played these guys in a while, but I do certainly love the Warriors of Chaos. Big Bird being probably one of my favorite legendary lords in the game, to be honest. We're taking on the Lizardmen today, so let's get straight to it. We've got 4 Marauder Horsemen with Javs. Of course, since I've got Big Bird, I've gone with a non-AP build. We've got Marauders, Shielded Chosen, the Mirror Guard, Weird Spawn, of course, for additional armor sundering. Sarthrel's got Plague of Rust, Searing Doom, and Transmutation of Lead. As for my opponent, he's got a flying force of Pterodon Riders here with Pawhawk Sentinels, led by Tic-Tac-Toe. We've got Colossedon Hunters and Ripperdactyls. Infantry force is Saurus Warriors mixed with Red Crest. We've also got the Regiment of Renown Star Guardians here, and the Regiment of Renown Salamanders as well, the Umbral Tide. So you can see right off the bat, I'm rolling up with my Javs. Javelins do a lot of missile damage and will trade very efficiently with these Pterodons, and especially the Ripperdactyls because of their low armor. I mean, you know, my opponent being very polite here and obliging me. You know, I brought a primarily non-armor piercing build with tools to just tear armor away, and my opponent brought a lot of high-value low armor units, of which the Lizardmen now have a few. So, great for me. I don't necessarily need the AP. Big Bird and the Manticore are going to drop down for a quick hit and run here just to disrupt my opponent's line, kind of pull him a little bit out of position as my infantry line advances. The Marauder Javs going to work their way up and around here, trying to get into a position to support. Big Bird, being the slippery bugger that he is able to get out of this air ambush here. The Pterodons can't really keep him in place, so he's going to screen out through these Marauders. And again, because of the low armor and low melee defense of the Pterodon Riders, trading against Chaos Marauders is not going to be very efficient, and especially once these Chosen roll in. Oh man, Chosen are just so badass. They look so cool. Oh man. Shielded Chosen, especially being the cheapest variant and the one with the highest melee defense, are generally my preferred option. You can see over here the Weird Spawn combining with these Marauders, just absolutely munching on these Saurus and Red Crest. That being said, the Weird Spawn have taken some pretty decent damage, all things considered. The Searing Doom there just blows up those Red Crests, though, and here comes Big Bird with his ridiculous charge animation. Gonna get in here and proc a quick tear out on those Skinks, so they will be out of here. Meanwhile, you can see the Umbral Tide are unloading on my Marauder Horsemen, which is not great because I definitely need them to take out these Pterodon Riders here. So we're going to use the Hounds to go after the Umbral Tide. They're not going to beat... Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. I had some Chaos Poison Warhounds hidden in the woods. They were going to go after those Umbral Tide. We at least managed to push them off for the time being, but because of the armor and the combat stats of the Umbral Tide, they will be able to beat the Hounds in melee. I mean, they don't have amazing combat stats, but 90 armor is pretty decent. But if I can at least tie them down and keep them from shooting, that's the most important thing. You can see here, this is not the best situation, but again, with the support of the Poison Warhounds here, kind of poisoning everything, there are also Chosen models mixed in here as well. And again, they have very good melee defense, weapon strength, and melee attack. And it's just so many models for the Pterodons to have to deal with that it's going to be tough for them. They are taking quite a bit of damage. Umbral Tide still unloading on my Skirmish Cav here, which are a little bit bunched up, taking significant damage there. But we have been able to rout off the Skink Chief there with the missiles. Over here, these Temple Guard are pretty much surrounded. You can see Overcast, Plague of Rust on them. Brought them down to only 25 armor, which means they are going to be taking significant damage, especially from the Chosen hits. Chosen with their, I believe it's 50-something. They're currently poisoned from those pesky Pterodon Riders, but still. Over here, Tic-Tac-Toe dives down to take on Big Bird. This is honestly a pretty good engagement for Big Bird. He has good enough melee attack, and he also has Standard Die to be able to buff up his own melee defense. Tic-Tac-Toe, I mean, he has great combat stats, but the Transmutation of Lead nerfs his melee attack significantly there. And, you know, once the Master of the Skies and other buffs wear off, he really doesn't have a whole lot of armor or melee defense. He will get beat up by Big Bird pretty bad, so, yeah, an unfortunate situation there from Tic-Tac-Toe, but we'll see. He might be able to bring this back. It's not looking great. The Umbral Tide are still relatively healthy. They did manage to fend off those Hounds, and these Marauders, and especially these Chosen here, are getting very, very low. Many of the other Chaos units routed off at this point. This Manticore probably going to get taken down by Pterodon Riders here, which is pretty impressive for those Pterodon Riders, all things considered. But here I do still have a very strong force of infantry, a lot of marauders chosen, the mirror guard still relatively healthy, and these horsemen, although they have taken some losses, they are still online and ready to go. So we'll see. Big Bird in a little bit of an exposed position, but like I said, I'm not honestly too worried about it, especially with Chosen nearby in a position to be able to support here. They're just chasing down these Salamanders here. Obviously, the Salamanders with their armor will be able to hold out, but not the best combat stats in the world. 46 melee attack on the Chosen. Big Bird gets jumped by the Pterodon squad here, or sorry, the Ripperdactyl squad. He is taking some damage, but again, the Ripperdactyls, they just don't have the mass to be able to pin him in. So he can pretty much just run away if he needs to. And yeah, you can see there, he just basically walks straight through them. So yeah, not the best situation. Those Chosen are getting rained on by the Umbral Tide, which is not the most comfortable thing, but I still have such a strong force over here. The weird spawn still left with 5 models, just finish off the Star Chamber Guardians, and with the rest of these forces rolling over, it's only a matter of time. So honestly, even if I lose Big Bird here, there's really not a lot of a chance. The Lizardmen coming back. So we'll just kind of soak up some cinematics as Big Bird just haggardly runs around, charges in for a quick attack. Oh, looks like we're throwing down another Transmutation of Lead there. Transmutation of Lead, honestly, a pretty underrated spell in my opinion, especially against factions which tend to have a relatively low melee attack. Of course, the Colossadon Hunters, the Ripperdactyls, they are somewhat of an exception to that on the Lizardmen roster, but like Saurus Warriors, even some of their monsters don't have the best melee attack stats in the world, so with Transmutation of Lead, you can really just nerf their stats into the ground, make it very hard for them to get hits in melee. And just generally, build worked out pretty well. Like I said, I brought plenty of armor sundering, but really the only armored units for my opponent were the Star Chamber Guardians and the Umbral Tide, both of which we were able to deal with reasonably effectively. I didn't really highlight it too much, but this one unit of Red Crest did beat out a unit of Marauders on the flanks super hard. 73 kills, managed to pick up an XP Chevron as well. But yeah, this replay sort of goes to show how much of glass cannons the Ripperdactyls can be. I mean, they are very high damage, but they also take a lot of damage. They don't have good armor, they don't have good melee defense. I honestly think that CA could maybe stand to buff their melee defense a little bit, but these guys did manage to get only 7 kills, but an XP Chevron. I think they did a ton of damage to the weird spawn. Probably did some damage to Big Bird as well, maybe the Manticore, but 102 kills. The Umbral Tide definitely did well there. My opponent did a pretty good job of protecting them, keeping them online into the late game. They're a little bit expensive for what you get out of them, but hey, he played with them relatively well. It's just the squishy flyers were kind of the downfall here, I think. You know, people tend to go with more traditional monster-heavy builds against Chaos, but it's definitely an interesting matchup, and there is a little bit of rock, paper, scissors there, but yeah, tic-tac-toe. If your opponent ends up bringing like a Chaos Lord on a dragon or something like that, then tic-tac-toe. Even then, the Chaos Lord, for those of you guys who don't know, on a dragon is one of the most powerful flying creatures in the game if you kit him out with everything. The Filth Mace isn't even that necessary. It's nice, but mainly what you need is a Pendant of Slanesh and Standard Die, along with Deadly Onslaught. And if you really want to get crazy, you can throw something like a Fire Sorcerer in there, throw Fireball, or sorry, not Fireball, Cascading Fire Cloak to give even additional melee defense and weapon damage. It'll also proc Kindle Flame, of course, which gives extra weakness to fire, and the Chaos Lord, of course, on a Chaos Dragon does fire damage. So just worth noting, I want to say in the testing I did before that this guy completely wrecked Tic-Tac-Toe. But, I mean, of course, with the Colossadon Hunters and supporting missiles and everything, that may be a little bit different. The Chaos is relatively limited in terms of the flyers it can bring. You really can only bring, like, other heroes on Manticores or Feral Manticores, so it is a bit of a risk. But just in a more general sense, like, even against Kolek, or, like, you know, Big Bird, Sigvald, any of the above, even Archaon, I just don't see the Ripperdactyls paying off super well in this matchup. Like, it looks nice on paper, but again, because of the low melee defense and the low armor, Marauder Horsemen are just a really good counter to them. They can rain in javelins that will do a ton of super cost-effective damage, and I mean, Ripperdactyls are pretty expensive. What, 1,500 for the Colossadon Hunters, 1,200 for the regular unit. I mean, they do a lot of damage, like I said, but only 22 melee defense and 45 armor on a unit this expensive means that they will take a lot of damage very, very quickly. So it's really tough to make them work. It's a lot more reliable, from what I've found, to go with Kroxigors, just because they're a lot more tanky. They're a little bit less expensive. They have more unit models. They do slightly less damage per model, but they have more unit models overall. They also have bonus versus infantry, armor piercing, not quite as much melee attack, but I mean, they have even heavier mass. Like, they can pit in models like Big Bird somewhat. I mean, they have a hard time getting a full surround, but, you know, they certainly have heavier mass than the Pterodons. And just in general, they're a lot more cost-effective of an option if you're looking for an armor-piercing kind of support option. Granted, the mobility is not there, but I really think that the lesser cost and the extra tankiness, the extra survivability is absolutely worth it. In a more general sense, obviously, Feral Carnosaur can be quite good here. For only 1,600, it's elite anti-large AP, especially if you're buffing it up with something like Harmonic Convergence from Lore of Heavens. This thing can be an absolute monster for a really reasonable price. Of course, you could always take something like a Scar Veteran on a Carnosaur, which is a little bit more expensive, but also, you know, better leadership. It actually has the same stats. Interesting. In fact, slightly better leadership, but other than that, almost exactly the same stats. So it's probably worth it to just take the Feral Carnosaur and use one of your hero options to maybe take like a Skink Chief on the Pterodon, or, you know, something else. But yeah, let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below about this matchup. Certainly an interesting one, and a very, very thematic one as well. I haven't explored it too much since the Lizardmen got their DLC, but just based on what I've seen, I would say, you know, the old school Kroxigors, Feral Carnosaurs, more traditional style build, I think will work well here. Certainly Red Crests do give you a nice frontline support option, so just kind of going off the cuff here, if I were to put together something real quick, I might go with Tehenuin just to give my caster and lord in one, put him on a horned one to give him some mobility, but also the ability, I'm tempted by the Ripperdactyl, but, you know, the horned one, I don't know, it's just a bit cheaper. Maybe I would take the horned one. I might take the Ripperdactyl, but just in general, I would probably take Manticore Summon's almost always good. Amber Spear might be good here to try and cut through armored infantry. But Flock of Doom also is a reliable way to put out a little bit of DPS. You could also do like Wiston's Wild Forms, pretty good for buffing up Saurus. So something like that, and then let's grab some units of Saurus here. Relatively expensive, so I might cut, let's see here. Let's cut one of these Red Crests, and then that's going to allow us to tank up on some extra Skink Cohort just to take numbers. This doesn't have any ranged units. I might fine-tune this build a little bit more, do something like cut the Kroxigors, maybe to bring just some more numbers, like some Skink Skirmishers. I don't know. I'd have to play around with this a little bit and see. Maybe take a couple jabs here. I don't know. Something like this, though, with the Kroxigors to do your anti-infantry damage, your Feral Carnosaur to do your anti-large damage, Tehenuin just kind of to go do whatever, you know, he needs to do. Let me know what you guys think, though. Certainly an interesting matchup, and one that I am looking forward to exploring more in the future. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.